What's happening, New Year's fuckers? It's your boy Jack Slack, Fighting On By podcast, coming at you on the 3rd. I'm sounding a little rough, probably because I've been ill. But, I'm not going to complain too much because I had a bad back and then I almost fucked my knee when I went back to training. And then someone made me ill, presumably turning up to the mats with a snotty nose like a just nasty knacker. But that was my Christmas period, just one awful long sick. But here I am, I'm better now, we're good. I managed to get my first, I did a preview of the year, 2020 in the UFC at Unibet, and I also did the first of the Slacky Awards, because I thought I could get them all done in an article, and then I realised I was 2,000 words in and I was still on the first award. So if you want to check out who won the Technical Turnaround Award, get over to the Fight Primer. And in the meantime, let's have a bloody good moan about Bellator and Rizin. I can only assume that some of you have been waiting all year for this. We are 3 days in, but to be fair, I'm sure some people saw the matchup was announced, saw my reaction to the matchup being announced, and were then like, I cannot wait for this to happen so that Slack can just shit all over it. But I told you, I said the moment they signed this, it was going to be shit. And everyone knew it was going to be shit, except for some idiots who were still somehow excited for it. I mean, Legend on Reddit this was a while ago, but he was telling me that it was the weekend that Joanna versus Waterson was happening, and he was like, I think you'll find it's a better main event than Joanna versus Waterson. And then he doubled down and was like, it's better than more than 50% of main events in the UFC, and that they're not actually that washed, and Rampage and Fedor could both still beat Sergey Spivak, which was just just got more retarded with every line I read. I mean, he's trebled down in the aftermath. He was like, this is a very good fight, and I enjoyed it very well. Well, like Teep, he was like, that fight was everything all the haters hoped it wasn't. Like, what the fuck fight were you watching? He was so elated that Fedor Emelianenko picked up a win that he was like, it's only the haters who were upset by that match. You're like, no, the guy he was fighting clearly didn't care, which has been true for a while. I cannot believe that Rampage is still a draw for them, because when he was fighting King Mo in Bjorn Rebney's Bellator, he didn't care then. Like, the entire reason that they kept putting him in heavyweight fights was because he refused to diet or exercise. When they announced this was going to be heavyweight, he knew he was going to be a fat waste of space, but he went hard as a motherfucker trying to get fatter for this fight. Even better, Coach Calavita, or whatever his name is, the legend who put out that press statement about TJ Dillashaw being a soldier fallen on the battlefield of public expectation, he claimed that Rampage was going to be coming in with 20 pounds of muscle that he'd put on. And firstly, I laughed at that, and some geniuses were like, 20 pounds of muscle over 12 weeks at age 41 isn't out of the question, Jack. You're like, yeah, it is. Especially if you are already a professional fighter who's been weight training their entire career, and also have probably been on roids in the past. I mean, Rampage was on TRT for a while, wasn't he, when it was legal? So he doesn't have scruples about that sort of thing. But just imagine being allowed to roid up and still coming in looking like that. If you didn't see it, I mean, go watch it, because it is absolutely shocking. The guy just he looked embarrassed to take his shirt off, and really, this just continued the theme of Bellator, which is we get to the point where Bellator is no longer interesting as a fight company. What they are interesting in is the conversation they bring in to around what is a dive and what isn't a dive. Obviously, we all know it's a dive if you take money to dive. But is it a dive if you take money to show up, don't train, know you're not going to be in shape for it, turn up fat, swing maybe one punch, and then go, oh no, I hate this, and as soon as he hits you, fall over and motion to the ref by shaking your head and going, nah. The guy who was comfortably soccer kicked 4 times in the face by Shogun and trying to keep going, that guy got hit by Fedor and went, no, and was shaking his head at the ref. I don't like to accuse fighters of quitting or whatever, but if you watched him fight, he clearly didn't want to be there. And I think the part of it was probably because he's got yes men in his ears saying, it's okay, Paige, you don't even need to train. You know, he turned up fat as fuck, and then he looked like, when he swang back, he looked like he wanted to hurt Fedor, but he looked like he also couldn't move half as fast as he thought he was going to be able to. You know, like, imagine the level of not training and delusion that you'd have to like start swinging back and be like, oh fuck, being 60 pounds heavier has slowed me down somewhat. It was, to be honest, an absolute embarrassment. I mean, the important point is that Fedor got his win. That's very important. And then he said he was going to retire, and then was promptly attacked by his yes men and reconsidered his position and was like, I think I was mistranslated by the translator that I handpick. And of course, like, team photo, Rampage bounces up to be in the team photo because he's like, haha, it's just me, Rampage, I'm here for a good time. And then you can see Jerry Millen just glomming onto Fedor in the background. Like, how weird is it that Jerry Millen outlasted the Rasputin guy? That's how good at glomming onto people that Jerry Millen is. Fucking hanger-on of the century. I can just imagine getting to a party, realising Jerry Millen's there, and be like, this is going to be a shit party. What was good on that card? Almost fucking nothing. Goatee Yamauchi submitted Darren Cruikshank because Darren Cruikshank, like Justin Scoggins, has a massive hole in his game. Michael Chandler fought Sydney Outlaw. Sydney Outlaw, 14-3, I think he was at the time. But he'd been decent and then retired for 4 years or something like that. Oh no, he's been around for a while. Okay, so he just beat Roger Huerta, which really doesn't tell you much about him. But he fought Chandler. Chandler did his usual thing, long dipping jabs to the body, right straight to the body, which I liked. You know, I was watching him going, okay, Chandler, against my better judgment, I do like you, because you do work with Neil Melanson, and you do throw right straight to the body. He also times a good overhand counter. But in this one, he landed an inside right for the knockout, which is kind of rare. You don't really see that very much. If you consider, like... So an inside right is a right straight to the opponent's head as you slip inside their jab. Now, if you can imagine slipping inside someone's jab, there's not really an awful lot of space to get your shoulder in there. So sometimes you had to, like, bring your hand down to your chest and shoot it up the inside like that. Edwin Hazlett used to talk about... I think he threw it, like, vertical fist. But yeah, you just don't see him often because obviously it's easier to slip inside the punch and arc your punch over the top. It's like your head's going inside and you're leaving the rest of your body behind. To throw an inside right, you have to get your whole shoulder inside and throw the right up the inside. So it was pretty cool to see him land it, and he scored the knockout with it, which was pretty awesome. I mean, you see why it's a dangerous punch, because if you clock someone up the inside of their jab, they've got no way of stopping you from, like, turning their head round, and they probably won't see it coming. So beautiful stuff from Chandler. Then you had MVP versus what's his name? Hold on, Shinso Anzai, who I know from that picture of him wearing a singlet with, like, one sleeve. But Anzai had been in the UFC. He blew 2 record in the UFC. You'll probably remember him from getting absolutely bodied by Jake Matthews in his last one, and winning a fight via the opponent injuring their hand. But you know, it's good enough for some people. You know, usual Michael Page stuff, running around the ring, trying to answer everything with a flying knee. I think there aren't very many fighters good enough to stick to the game plan against Michael Page, but I think the game plan is very obvious, because if you saw him against Paul Daly, and I'm not just saying, like, you just double leg him, it's easy. No, I'm saying, like, when Daly was threatening to double leg him, all he'd do is back onto the fence and then wait and try and jump for a flying knee. And if Daly feinted him, he'd jump for the flying knee, try and get down, and try and jump for the flying knee again. His answer to takedowns is to try and flying knee you. And I think against actually good people, that's really not going to hold up. But we know this. We know that's why he's not fighting good people. Partly because there aren't very many good people in Bellator, full stop. But Bellator had a decent, has had a decent welterweight division for a while. Daly was passable. But you got, like, Larkin, you got Koreshkov, who's alright. You got Lima, obviously, terrific fighter. You used to have Roy McDonald, but he's gone to PFL now. PFL, they just did a New Year's Eve event I think that was their big $1 million prize money thing, where they gave Kayla Harrison $1 million for fighting no one. But they did that on New Year's Eve, and I made jokes about that because the entire reason that the World Series of Fighting went under and had to rebrand and change its name was that they decided to do an event on New Year's Eve. They're trying at Madison Square Garden for some reason. They're trying to. Firstly, you probably get Madison Square Garden cheap on New Year's Eve because who the fuck else is going to go out on New Year's Eve to Madison Square Garden? Like, you have hardcore fans, and then a lot of them have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or a wife. And they are going to get taken somewhere on New Year's Eve. They are not going to show up to your fucking MMA event. It's not Japan, and you don't have a TV deal. So, like, I don't get the brain think behind this. But they did it anyway, and then they did it again. However, they did like 320,000 viewers, I think, which isn't great, but it is better than Bellator's been doing in their more recent announced stuff. I mean, they're on DAZN now, so DAZN could just lie because they don't have to tell you anything. But anytime Bellator's on TV, they do garbage. I heard that Fedor versus Rampage, their tentpole event of the year, the most anticipated fight in Bellator history, did something like 311,000 viewers. Obviously, you know, we're not Dave Meltzer, we don't actually give that big a shit about the numbers, but it pleases me to know that people aren't just full-on retarded. Anyway, so MVP picks up his win over Ansai. What was his name? Shinsho something or other. Shinsho Ansai. And then the only really interesting thing of the evening was Lorenz Larkin versus Keita Nakamura. I've known Keitaro for a long old while, because he used to be a big fixture in the ADCC trials in Asia. Very good at taking backs and choking people, but he's a judoka first and foremost, I think. But he did a good job, I thought. Very admirable job of trying to put it on Larkin, trying to walk him down, shoot straights down the centre. Larkin body kicking him, jabbing him up. Lovely stuff. Lovely shoulder rolls from Larkin. You know, he's always been good at that along the fence. Basically, he went to the fence with Ponzinibbio walking him down and was able to hurt Ponzinibbio coming off the fence. That's how good off the fence he is. Does a lot of the Jersey Joe, you know, turn into the reverse shoulder roll and come back with punches that way. What you saw in this fight, because it was Southpaw versus Orthodox, Larkin would go to the shoulder roll, but he would bring the right hand across to parry the left straight at the same time. Like that a lot. People do it with the right straight against... Well, you can do it with the jab or the right straight when you're dealing with an orthodox fighter, and you're an orthodox fighter, and you're going shoulder roll. You can parry their straights onto your shoulder because it's, you know, the idea is to catch it with your shoulder so it bounces off your shoulder. But you can parry the punch as well. You can do sort of a belt and braces thing. Guys get in the habit of like shoulder rolling and having their right hand way pinned to their head to stop the left hook. And you don't really need to. You can double up on the hand if you can see what's coming. You can parry it and come back. And there were a couple like that in this one. He got on the fence, parried onto his shoulder the straight punches, and then came back with straight punches of his own. Threw a couple of weird spinning kicks. There's always something in a Larkin fight that just stands out at you. And in this fight, I was really looking at his back foot position because he likes to like side kick and hook kick off the lead leg, and he likes to drop away and sway back into his stance away from blows. But it's very hard to drop away into your stance when your rear foot is pointing towards the opponent. A lot of times people have a very offensive foot positioning, which is what's called forward and 45 sometimes. You have the lead foot pointing forward, you have the rear foot between forward and 45 degrees. If you have the rear foot pointing out and your lead foot forward, you look like you're a duck. You know, it looks like you've got a club foot and you're dragging it. But if you fight for a normal stance, and then as you step back with your right foot, you point it out behind you, you can make more space to lean back. It's very hard to really drop away from the opponent's punches if your foot's pointing towards them or in that sort of direction. If you open and point it away from them, you can open your hip up a bit more and you can lean over it. There's a really good clip of Lyoto Machida's dad talking about stances, like traditional karate stances, and the back stance is the one that we're sort of talking about here. But if you watch traditional karateka doing a back stance, it's so rigid and goofy looking. But if you watch Machida's dad explaining it, he says, and in the back stance, the back knee points out, we lean all the way back onto it, and we can make some distance. And you're like, that's a nice application of that principle. Don't need all the other, like, constipated shit attached to it. Yeah, smart guy, Machida's dad. Except the drinking pee stuff. But we all have our blind spots. So yeah, good fight. I thought Nakamura gave a very good account of himself. Larkin beat him up. Didn't come too close to finishing him. Larkin's a bit of a hit and miss character with finishing people. Always tries to hurt them, but not amazing at finishing all the time. And then Yasuki actually soccer kicked a dude in the main event, which was fantastic. Well, not the main event, the post-limbs. People were so mad about the post-limbs because, Bellator set up some good post-limbs. We always laugh at the idea of post-limbs. But if you've got Yasuki Yachi on your post-limbs, he is a big favourite in Rizin. I mean, I've trained with him, but he's, I like him a lot. I was writing a Prospect Watch piece on him a little while ago. He's a very, very good lightweight out of Japan. Knocked out Darren Cruikshank. But Bellator, lined up these post-limbs and then apparently just didn't broadcast them. So people were furious. I mean, that's what you get if you're Rizin and you get into bed with Bellator. You're going to get a fucking shitty product. Now, fair play to Rizin, because a couple of days later, they had Rizin 20. This was Bellator 237, which was like a crossover event. Rizin 20 had some Bellator fighters on, but they really managed to wash the stink of Bellator production off their brand. And they were doing the final portion of their Lightweight Grand Prix. Lightweight Grand Prix is obviously great tradition in Asia. I've talked about the Dream Grand Prix was fantastic. Obviously, the Pride Lightweight Grand Prix was fantastic. I didn't have hugely high hopes for this one. Obviously, they trotted out Kawajiri to get murdered by the worst Pitbull brother in the first round of this. Rizin are doing favours for Bellator, and Bellator are doing fuck all for Rizin. But the guys left in this one were Patricky Pitbull, Luis Gustavo, Tafik Masayev, and Johnny Case. In the opener, I thought Tafik Masayev, he caught my attention because Johnny Case, he rattled John. He's got this loopy ass style, Masayev. He looks like a wrestler who's just sort of having a go striking, kind of like Habib, where he's not great on the feet, but he's got ideas. He'll go, okay, cool, I'll return each time I see that coming. He can spot an opening. He's just not very technically crisp. And Masayev was trying to come back on Case's punches. Did well, caught him with I think it was a jab and an overhand, and rocked him. And he charged in on Case, and Case just double-legged him. And I was like, uh-oh, Masayev, well done, you've thrown away the opportunity. But Masayev hit a beautiful stand. There were a few in this event, just lovely wrestling techniques applied in MMA, defensive wrestling techniques. And so Masayev, as Case takes him down, he's got one wrist, pushes it away, begins to stand up like you would from referee's positions with the hand pushed out. Case tries to come back in. He pulls the hand over his shoulder, stands up and underhooks on that side. And he immediately shucks him off and starts punching again. So he manages to get back to his feet and push through for the finish too, from a position that looked really bad. So I was immediately like, wow, I'm watching out for this Masayev's wrestling, even if he's won that fight as like a spazzy banger. Patricky Pitbull fought Luis Gustavo, knocked him down and soccer kicked him because that's what everyone loves on a Rising card. Soccer kicks really, they don't actually land that often. Really, soccer kicks, they're really more of a deterrent, and they tend to land on people who have already been knocked down. It's when the ref doesn't get there quick enough that a soccer kick happens. But yeah, Mimi Yamamoto laid all over Amp the Rocket, and she dyed her hair blue, and it made her look like 20 years older. Tiger got kneed in the eye. That was brutal. There was a great little scrap between Patchy Mix. I think his name's Patrick, isn't it? I don't know. But Patchy Mix, he is a Bellator fighter, I think, and Yuki Matoya, who's good fun. And they had a great little grappling match. It was only, how long was it? It was only like a couple of minutes. But Mix took him down. Matoya was using butterflies and threatening to stand up. Moved through for a triangle. Went over for the omoplata. Scrambled as Mix tried to step over his head. Ended up in the bottom of the sprawl. Mix picked up a guillotine and went to his back. And he body triangled his legs around him as he did it. It was very cool. Ring got in the way again, though, because Ring always does. Like, Matoya was trying to take him down, and Patchy Mix immediately grabs the ropes. And I was like, this guy has seen Rizin before. You know, that's how you study tape. You go, what can I get away with? Because if you put your elbow over the ropes, the old Fedor, just put your elbow over the ropes so that you can't fall down, but you're not literally holding it. They don't do anything about it. They don't do shit. The referee will slap your elbow from the outside, but if it's not coming off the ropes, it's not coming off the ropes. What I'm saying is, if you are a Bellator fighter training for Rizin and you're not training to grab the ropes with your elbow, you're a fucking idiot. If you're anyone training for Rizin, you don't do that. Or one, actually. It works there, too, when they do the ring. Jake Hyun versus Satoshi Ishii. Another cool little wrestling moment. Ishii takes him down. Hyun bounces back up, giving up his back in the process. Ishii's behind him with the body lock. Hyun hits a 300-pound Granby. It was gorgeous. And then came up and knocked him down with punches. Now, the probably fight of the night for me was Oge Kubo versus Ishii Watari. I knew both these guys coming in. I consider them some of Rizin's best homegrown talents, or the best fighters that Rizin has, like, who aren't just names. You know, some of these guys are names for the sake of being names. Some of these guys are like Rena, where they're not amazing, and there certainly isn't anyone in their division, but they are famous. Whereas Oge Kubo is famous for, well, not even famous, but he's known for being good. I think he's the best fighter in tough to never get a fight in the UFC afterwards or something like that. And he gave Kyoji Horiguchi one of his few losses too. So, and then he had a rematch with him and lost, but was decent in it, you know. And then Ishii Watari got to the final of the Grand Prix with Kyoji and then got smoked. But he also got smoked after getting caught behind the post of the ring with his head through the ropes, and you could see him being like battered, and the referee's on the other side. He's like, well, if I can't see him taking brain trauma, I don't believe it's happening. But Ishii and Oge Kubo had a good little scrap. Awkward striking on the feet from both. Ishii is a judo guy, but he's got a good left straight, right straight, whichever. He was the southpaw or the orthodox. And Oge Kubo was just like the shorter guy, so he's trying to swing wild and just sort of kept like catching him with forearms on the neck. Like, none of the striking was particularly effective, but they were at least going for it. When they did hit the mat, really good to see Oge Kubo immediately going to put in a butterfly in from his half guard, and it really made a contrast with Vitaly Shemetov, who fought in the next match, and he got taken down, was in half guard, and he had kept trying to shrimp out and use a knee shield, and it just wasn't working. Oge Kubo just hooked in the butterfly hook, and then when Ishii Watari tried to pressure into him, he just tried to take him over the top towards the butterfly hook and get underneath him to attack the leg. Ishii Watari would put his weight in the other direction, and Oge Kubo would lift him with the hook and get out. And he did it several times. Like, the butterfly half guard is a money guard. I mean, there's a reason that Gordon Ryan is playing it all the time. Because you're locked to the opponent in the way that the half guard protects you from them running around your guard, but you've also got a form of elevation / getting underneath them / standing up. And of course, the reason that Ryan and the Down at the Death Squad guys play it is because it protects your top leg. The guy can't just fall back and reap it. What else was good? I mean, Jimmy Przatska, who is their light heavyweight guy, fought CB Dollaway. CB Dollaway is 36'7". Jiri's still young. I mean, Jiri, he's their top guy, but he hasn't really beaten anyone good. They most recently brought him in Fabio Maldonado and headlined an event with it. It was desperate. But against Dollaway, he just sort of chased him down, had his chin out in the way all the time. As they're like coming around a court, he did take down Dollaway off a kick, like caught the kick and ran through him, and then Dollaway turned his back, got up, and immediately stripped the hands off. Again, another example of just perfect basic wrestling. You know, get up, strip the hands, peel the top grip off. But he caught Dollaway turning into like a shoulder roll as he pivoted around the ring. He hit him with an uppercut left hook, and Dollaway's hand, well, we talked about the right hand needing to be high on, or not always needing to be high on the shoulder roll, but it wasn't there, and he just got thrown by Jiri, because Jiri's huge for a light heavyweight. And the news coming out of this is that Jiri's like talking to the UFC and Bellator, because frankly they got no one for him to fight. They dragged out like Bellator middleweight Brandon Halsey, washed up light heavyweight Muhammad Lawal, another Bellator guy. Then they found the ghost of Fabio Maldonado floating around the European scene, and then they found CB Dollaway. So he's already almost entirely relying on Bellator letting him have people to fight anyway. So, yeah, it'd be good to see him go somewhere else. So you had the final of the tournament, which was Tafik Musayev versus Patricky Pitbull. And what I really liked about this was that just Musayev kept a high pace, because Patricky Pitbull was ready to just stand back and try and crack him with punches, and Musayev was game. He returned on most of his punches. I mean, he kept catching Pitbull, being surprised he caught Pitbull, then continuing his combinations, or rather just flurries, and then Pitbull would crack him and send him reeling backwards. I think there was a lot of the young guy being able to take big shots in this one. But the wrestling was basically all Musayev. Anytime Pitbull kicked, he'd just pick it up and sweep the other leg. The ring pissed me off royally in this fight, because, I mean, at the end, Pitbull was trying to take down Musayev. Musayev stuck his head under the top rope and then stood up into it so that he couldn't be pulled away. There was another one where Musayev was mounted on his legs and Pitbull was trying to run away, crawl up to standing. And Musayev made sure to mount his one leg and then mount the rope as well and cross his legs under it. There was some really blatant cheating going on, but good on Musayev for just showing how shit the ring is. But he's taking Pitbull down, Pitbull's turning away onto his hands. And there was a really nice one in the Ogakube fight where he dumped Ishiwatari onto his hands and then kicked him in the face. Reminded me of an old Nick Diaz fight against some Japanese can in Dream. But he dumped him on his hands, and then he tried to he had a single or something like that. He turned him around and then tried to shoot on the ankle of the standing leg, and it was a really nice shot. Problem was that Pitbull just jumped through the ropes and hit the floor. And you're like, why not have an apron around the fucking edge of the ring so that there's something to fall onto? Which they used to have on boxing rings too, because I remember Nigel Benn falling through the ropes. Instead, he fell onto the floor, and there was a good few minutes where they were like, has he hurt his shoulder? Will this fight continue? Just the ropes, they're shit for MMA. Which, everyone knows at this point, but it needs to be reiterated because the Japanese still think it's like a choice and not just, they're like, there's either or, there's ups and downs to both. And you're like, no, there's exclusively downs to one. It's shit. Rina Kubota won her fight. Seohee Ham won a fight despite looking like garbage. I mean, she won the fight because basically in the second round she caught a triangle and was never in danger of finishing it, but Hamasaki never got out of it, so it was a full round in a triangle. But in the first round, Seohee Ham comes out ready to do her Vandalay thing, and Hamasaki, who's a grappler, jabbed her face off. And the third round was just Hamasaki took her down, got side control, couldn't do much with it. Seohee Ham, they were desperate to get a belt on her. The weeb, sorry, I was going to say the JMMA community, but I mean weeb. The thirsty weeb community has been desperate to get a belt on Seohee Ham forever, but she literally couldn't deal with the jab of another atomweight. Tenshin Asakawa smashed Rui Ibata, which is great. They kept calling Rui Ibata the toughest opponent that Tenshin's ever faced or some shit like that, and I was like, we all remember Rodtang, right? Rodtang is a monster, even if they hadn't fought and he hadn't been robbed of a decision against Tenshin. That's still the hardest opponent that Tenshin's fought. But it was a good opponent, and Tenshin smashed him quick. The real letdown in this fight was the referee, who was just tripping all over himself. Like, he picked up Ibata's mouthpiece, and he was doing that thing where he was going to step in but wouldn't. And that's really dangerous, because that's how you get someone cold-cocked while they think that someone's stepping in and then they're not. And then he was tripping over them. He kept getting between them. It was fucking woeful refereeing. And then Manal Cape beat Kaya Sakura in that title fight. Absolutely bizarre. Some people were like, oh, Asakura got wild, but he's always been a good, aggressive fighter. I think the surprise to me was how not bad Manel Cape looked, because he normally looks like a sloppy wild man. In this one, he was throwing combinations, he was setting things up, and then Asakura hung around too long. He threw a combination and then was like, it was like when Machida stuck around in the pocket and got knocked out by Shogun in their rematch. You could see them go, oh, I think I'll push my luck. And, I've thrown that, I'll hang around and throw another thing. And as he did, Cape hit him with the shortest, straightest right hand I've ever seen Manel Cape throw, knocked him down, finished him with punches. Shame about the stoppage, and it was our boy, the official referee of the Fights Gone By podcast, Jason Herzog. Disappointing stoppage from him, but never mind. That was Rizin 20. It wasn't bad. If you haven't seen it, honestly, that's the sort of night of fights that you could download, and if you don't know any of them, you'll enjoy it. Whereas if you knew anyone going into Bellator and you watched it live, it was still shite. It really is the Bellator name. If it's attached to something, that event will just be cursed. Or maybe it's just Scott Coker's presence. I remember when the UFC were paying him to not form another company, the UFC was still worse somehow as a result. Right, that was the week that was. I'll be back on Monday. If you want to get in on the extra stuff we do, /support the podcast, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonepodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to read what I'm doing at any time, including the Slacky Awards and shit like that, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Bellator is awful and will never get better. Cheers!